record, and we're good to go.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Mount. I work for the Department of Environmental Conservation, Hudson River Estuary Management Program. And today we're going to be talking about the Hudson River Eel Project, specifically at Hannacroix Creek. So, Lindsay, do you also want to introduce yourself as the coordinator for Hannacroix specifically?
Absolutely. Lindsey Strehlau-Howay. I work at Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I coordinate the Hannacroix Creek site for the Eel Project. I think this is my, wow, is it third or fourth year? Um, Goes by very quickly. Um, but yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Sarah's going to start. But before we do, if we could just ask everybody to please mute, um, and I will hand it back to Sarah. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a presentation and give you a ton of information about eels and about the eel project. But I do want to encourage folks to use the chat feature. So even at this beginning point, since we only, we don't have a ton of people, if folks want to put, who you are and what brought you here today in the chat, it's nice to just get a sense of um, the mix of folks that we have. And then I asked in the beginning if anybody has any eel experience. That's always fun to know. Like if you've been sampling for 4 years or 10 years, or if you have a career's worth of wildlife management experience that you want to mention, that's also great. Just, a little bit about who you are and what brings you here today. In the meantime, I am going to, so we'll kind of like peruse that as we go, but I'm going to share my screen and start talking about eels a little bit. So bear with me while I get it going. All right, can everybody see the screen? Give me a thumbs up. You are looking good. Okay, great. I have like a few faces in there and I saw some thumbs, so that's good. Um, so again, we're talking about the Hudson River Eel Project. This season, spring 2026, will be coming one of these days. Um, this is a community science volunteer eel monitoring program. But first, we're going to start off talking about eels. So, and I'm going to bring up the chat so that I can follow along with people. Um, Not what I want. Sorry, everybody. I'll get there eventually. I might not be able to look at the chat. Lindsay, tell me if anything interesting is happening on the chat. I can't do them both
Yes, I can do that.
as things pop.
Yeah, we've got a few already. Do you want me to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So we've got Jason Smith with his daughter, Vivian. So she's interested in learning more about marine life, marine biology, and is incorporating this into her eighth grade community service project. We have Adam, who volunteered at the Hannacroix Creek site the last 2 years, but managed to miss most of the start of the year orientations. Happy to have you here today, Adam. He's looking
Get
forward
that
to this
background
year.
info. Two
Yeah.
years later. It's great. Get it.
Gordon, retired chief wildlife biologist, uh, am a delegate on a sites work group for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and involved in eel management issues at the international level. Living about 30 miles east of the study site. We have Jenna. She sampled at the Hannacroix for 2 years and became an ELR1 last year. Will Moore, high school science teacher at Neil Hellman School in Albany, hoping to get students involved and very excited about the eels. Teresa works for New York State DEC in the central office, Bureau of Habitat, volunteering on and off the Eel Project at this site since 2018. Tracy, um, with 30 years of water quality monitoring experience, macro invertebrates and eels at the Hannacroix site. And we also have Bernice, who is one of the advisors for High School Student Angler Club, volunteered before but missed last year. Hi, everybody. Hi, Bernice. Nice to see you again. Isabel Rowley, who is our intern at CCE this year. She's on. Get her to say hello to everybody. She's going to be coming out to the site often this season. We have Matt, who volunteered 3 years ago. Really enjoyed um, the little eelies at Hannacroix and hoping to get back to it. Warren helped out a couple years ago as an intern. Says hi, Sarah. Now working at DEC's Division of Water in Albany. Leanna, program coordinator for Columbia County Soil and Water, came in either one last year with me as well. And that's what we have so far. Feel free to keep adding information in, guys.
Yeah, what a great crew representing Hannacroix Creek. New and returning folks at various levels. That's really exciting. So some folks are very familiar with eels already, have interacted with them on a personal level. But like I said, we're going to start from the very beginning. So when we say eel, that often comes with a whole bunch of connotations. A variety of things come into mind. When we say eel, we're talking about the American eel, the scientific name Anguilla rostrata. Sometimes they're known as freshwater eels, as opposed to like eels that live in the sea, like moray eels or those kinds of things. But actually, American eels are migratory. They spend part of their life in the ocean and part of their life in freshwater and move between those systems to complete their life cycle. So for the next few slides, we're going to go through the life cycle of the American eel, which is a pretty amazing life cycle. Eels start their lives out in the Atlantic Ocean, roughly in an area somewhere near potentially the Sargasso Sea, which is in the North Atlantic. And I put all those qualifier words in the maybe, roughly, because scientists don't actually know where eels spawn or where eels hatch, where they start their lives. There's still a lot of mystery around the eel life cycle, particularly this oceanic phase. But what we do know is that um, they hatch from eggs and then have a larval stage called leptocephali. And this particular larval stage has retained its own Latin name, leptocephali, which means narrow head or thin head, because it has this small head on this larger willow leaf shaped body. Because for a very long time, they were thought to be a totally different species. Because if you look at this animal, which is, again is really tiny when they first hatch, um, it doesn't really look like an eel necessarily until in the 1700s, a scientist raised a leptocephali larval eel and watched it develop into a more familiar eel that folks would see in inland waters. So in the ocean, there are these larval eels. They're planktonic, which means they're floating along the ocean currents. They're not strong swimmers yet. So they ride ocean currents from the Sargasso, from the ocean, to habitats towards the land. Um, we have the Hudson River highlighted here because that's where we are. But the eel range is actually much further south than this in Colombia, Venezuela, the Caribbean, Mexico, and then much further north off this map as well into Canada and even Greenland. So it covers really the whole East Coast. But we focus on the Hudson just because that's where we are. So just know that eels are not only found in the Hudson River, but we're going to use that as an example. So the larval eels float along ocean currents. In this case, it's mainly the Gulf Stream, which is the strongest ocean current that follows the East Coast. And then somewhere off the continental shelf, where the waters get shallower here, they metamorphose into glass eels, which is what we see here, which then start free swimming, going up into estuaries and rivers and streams and into freshwater environments. But it does take about a year for that ocean phase, many months to nearly a year, before they look more like a classical eel and then start swimming upriver. They're called glass eels because they're transparent, as are the leptocephali, which is a good adaptation for being out in the ocean. What better camouflage than invisibility, right? So they're coming into rivers in the spring. So this is actually the life stage that we study. So if you join the project, this is the life stage that you can hold in your hands. But they actually spend many more years than just this arrival time, this migration season in rivers and streams like the Hudson River or Hannacroix Creek. And the life stage after glacials, they're known as elvers. They start to gain pigment pretty soon after entering these estuaries and rivers in these freshwater environments. And that's to blend into their new muddy bottom river environment. So they live on the bottom, they're going to live among the rocks, and they get this kind of brownish, greenish color. So from a glass eel, which is back here, towards an elver. And these are the two life stages that we could catch in our nets. Um, but they will stay for many, many years, most of the time in this yellow eel life stage. And it's the eels will live to different ages and grow to different sizes depending on their sex. So male eels mature at a smaller size and at a younger age than the females. So if you've ever seen a big eel, that's a female eel. And the large female eels can get to be 3 or 4 feet long and live for decades, 20 plus years, a female eel. And that's living in these freshwater environments, living in streams. So they go from, you know, glass eels coming in from the ocean are a key food source in the early spring as they move into rivers. It's like a big delivery of marine derived energy into these freshwater environments. And then as the eels grow, a large female yellow eel may be one of the top predators in a small stream system. So this eel here might eat things like smaller eels, other fish, crayfish, macroinvertebrates, a whole host of things. They're generalist predators, but um, many, many things in a stream. So this could take years, eating and growing. Then this is another area that we don't know too much about eels. At some point, something triggers their maturity where they'll go back out to the ocean to spawn. And then you can see the eel goes through another set of physical changes. Their coloration changes a little bit. This eel here is a male, so it's on the smaller side at maturity, and it's pretty early in its maturity. So they will get even darker on their back, even lighter on their belly, which is where they get the name silver eel from because they have a kind of silvery belly. And that is called counter shading, dark on the back, light on the belly. And that's a good camouflage for heading back out to the ocean. If you start thinking about it, so many aquatic animals have that kind of camouflage. And it's not just fish, although sharks, tons of things, but whales, penguins is a fun one. Turtles, darker on the back, lighter on the belly. It like moves across many different creatures. And that's because predators, human beings, because like we're standing on the ground, we don't have to worry about predators coming at us from not only above, but also below. Whereas fish are swimming around in the sea, where things that might want to eat them can be coming from many directions. So if you're looking down at an eel that has a dark back, that back blends into the dark bottom. Whereas if an eel is swimming up at the surface and they have a light belly, if a predator is looking up at them, that light belly blends in with the sky. So they change their color a little bit. Their eyes get really big. If we can like go back and forth, this is a big female eel. Do you see how like the proportion of the eye size to the head seems relatively normal? Whereas on this next eel, this is a mature male, that eye has gotten really big for the size of the face. So their eyes get larger so they can see on that oceanic migration they're going to make. And then the really most dramatic changes are happening inside their bodies, where up until this point, if you were to cut open an eel, you would not be able to find their reproductive organs because they haven't developed them yet. Only when they go through this transition do they start developing the reproductive organs and they actually stop eating and their guts atrophy. So their whole insides are basically reproductive organs. Then they are going to use all the fat stores that they've spent 10, 15, 20 plus years saving up from the inland waters to go back out to sea where they spawn once and then die. And nobody has ever seen eel spawning. There's very little that we know about this part of their life. We know that they leave and that they don't come back. Although there has been I could dig into some details, but it's pretty impressive that in many, many, many thousands of years of people, you know, studying eels, eating eels, asking questions about eels, there's still some things that we don't know. So there's a little summary of their life cycle. Again, they start out in the sea, move into inland waters, and then go back out to sea to spawn and die. But each eel only can do this full circle once because they only spawn once if they are able to survive out to the sea. So any eel that is, eaten by another eel or by a person or by an eagle is an individual that did not get to go back to the sea to reproduce. Any questions about the biology life cycle at this point?
We have one person asking about the size, and I just want to make sure the leptocephali size versus the glass eel size.
Oh yeah. So glass eels are about 2 inches long, and leptocephali, that's like maximum size of a leptocephali would be about 2 inches long, but they're going to start out much smaller, and then they spend months growing. So it depends on like which, you know, what stage of leptocephali we're talking about, but they start out, millimeters and get to a little bit before they metamorphose.
Great. We have one more question about how old would the silver eel be?
It depends on the sex and a bunch of other things too. So males is more on the scale of like roughly 10 years, although there's variable. It could be less or more than that. And females roughly 15, 20, but sometimes it's 30. It just depends. But again, longer for females because they get bigger. Any other questions that people have?
That's it for now, but maybe this is a good segue for my favorite question is how can you tell how old an eel is?
Oh, well, you can't tell, I mean, just by looking at them. Um, the way to tell for sure is to look at an internal structure called an otolith, which is like it's an ear stone that fish have inside their body, and then they accumulate material as they grow. And much like the tree rings of a tree, where you can count back the age of the tree, you can do the same with a slice of an otolith, and you'll see growth rings of as the fish grows. However, to do that, you have to, it's like the eel has to be dead to get into their skull and get that internal structure. You can estimate age on size, but there's a lot of variability depending on, what the food sources are in that area. How fast the eel is growing can be really variable in different places. So you can get an estimate, but it'll be with some error. Yeah. All right. So that was tons of eel information. Why do we care about eels? I mean, I mentioned a few things about how they're important ecologically. Um, they are important culturally all over the world. So we're talking about American eels again, because that's the species that we have here, but there's closely related species of migratory eels um, around the globe that all have their own like rich history. And even locally, there's really rich history of native people catching eels, eating eels for many, many, many generations. So, and globally, lots of history of people eating eels and interacting with eels in a variety of ways, not only eating them. Um, and then, there's also like just as a food source. They're a key food source for people as well. And then in recent decades, we have seen eel populations are going down. So that's one of the reasons why we're interested in knowing more about eels so that we can best conserve and protect them for all of those reasons that we think are important. So, why are eel numbers going down? There's a variety of reasons. We're not going to go through every single one here. The real takeaway that I want folks to have from this is actually that, you know, like eels have a complex life cycle, they're also facing a lot of complex challenges. there's a bunch of things happening in conjunction with each other that are not only impacting eels, but impacting aquatic environments, human environments, impacting the world. But for eels specifically, I'll just pick out a few. One is dams and barriers to their migration. So the eel range historically was huge. Again, I mentioned along the coast, north to south, how big it was. But also, if you would look at a map of the U.S., it was like two-thirds of the country because they would be in the Mississippi as well. Um, but much of that habitat has been cut off by the building of dams, which, because eels are connecting oceans and rivers, they need open waterways to be able to get to those upstream habitats. Water pollution, obviously, that can have impacts on the quality of habitat, the quality of the food, the health and safety of the eels themselves. Um, Historical overfishing is a component of the eel population declines. Climate change is one, particularly in the ocean, and even a small increase in ocean temperature can have really big repercussions for the strength and direction of ocean currents like the Gulf Stream. So that larval life stage that can't really swim yet, they're going to be taken maybe to, slightly different places at slightly different timing, depending on how ocean temperatures change. So now we're going to shift to talk about glass eels in particular. So we mentioned glass eels in the life stage, but in the life cycle. But this is the life stage that we study, and this is the life stage that many of you have already held in your hand. This could be a picture from any of you, maybe. But And we hope that the rest of you will join us in falling in love with these very adorable little glass eels. You can see, again, they're only about 2 inches long. This red spot right here, if you can see my cursor, is their heart. So if you hold a glass eel in your hand and you look at it very, very closely, you can actually see their little heart beating. You can see their eyes. This black line that runs down their body is actually not their intestines, it's their spinal cord. So you're looking at little dots of pigment in their vertebrae. Sometimes you can see their digestive tract, but it's pretty small and they're not eating much at this point, so it's not like the biggest feature. Really, those red gills and that red heart is one of the things that stand out the most when looking at a little glass eel. Um, we are not the only people fishing for glass eels. There is a commercial fishery for glass eels in Maine and a small one in South Carolina, but it's so small that um, it doesn't match to the one in Maine. Um, and that market is for glass eels specifically, um, that are then shipped mostly to Asia, not exclusively, but many of the like eel growing farms, eel aquaculture are in Asia. And that's to take the eels from glass eel stage to a kind of a yellow eel stage to a market size, where they're then processed and then shipped all over the world to be eaten. So if you've ever had unagi at a sushi restaurant here in New York, it's likely that that fish on your plate was caught in Maine, shipped to China to grow to market size, and then shipped back to New York to be eaten. And that's because nobody has been able to, in a cost-effective way, um, come up with eel aquaculture where they're raising multiple generations of eels. So when people say eel aquaculture, really they mean growing facilities of wild caught eels. So any eel that's eaten is one that was wild caught. And they can go for quite a bit. It's about $2,000 a pound. This is an old article, but the price has actually stayed the same for over 10 years now, where it's been steady at around $2,000 a pound. Um, we use very similar gear to the commercial fisher folk, but our purpose is not to fish to sell. Our purpose is to monitor how eel populations are doing. So the idea is for us to really understand how many eels there are, um, when and where. We have a few long-term sites that we're going to take a look at in a minute. Um, But this happens in the spring. We put out these specialized nets called fyke nets that are specifically designed only to catch young eels. Very rarely do we catch other things. It happens, but it's mostly eels in our nets. And then we have teams of trained samplers. This is you. This is where you all come in to catch, count, and release eels every single day during the migration season. So this is why we need such a like huge cohort of eelers because it's a lot of work to check a net every single day. We didn't come up with these protocols. We follow coast-wide methods designed by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which is a coast-wide management agency that manages migratory fish from Florida to Maine. And just a couple of years ago, our community science volunteer collected data was included in the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's American Eel Benchmark Stock Assessment. So what all those words mean is that's how they like evaluate how the eel numbers are doing, how the stock of eels are doing. Um, and they deemed our collective data, so like if you all were a part of the project, you are a part of that data set now, um, as like robust and good enough, strong enough to be included for real management purposes. So keep that in mind also while you're out at the stream. Like it's great fun and it's great science that's actually going into a real management application of assessing how eels are doing across the coast. So, we're a drop in the bucket, but we're a part of that larger picture of how eels are doing. Here are our sampling sites on the Hudson River. So, there is actually like the first site to monitor eels for New York State is on Long Island. That's the original to send to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. And then everything in the Hudson River is like gravy on top, where we've been able to add a lot of local knowledge and additional uh, information on top of that. So for our volunteer project, we have 12 sampling sites from Staten Island, as far south as Staten Island, all the way up to Hannacroix Creek. So Hannacroix is the furthest north. And this meeting here, this is for Hannacroix specifically, but I just wanted to give some context that if you're out checking the net at Hannacroix Creek, at that very same day, there are 11 other groups of people out at their local creek catching, counting, and releasing eels. So it's a part of this like larger group effort all along the Hudson Valley. So thank you for being a part of it. Um, Over the years, we've caught over 2 million eels, and then we release them a little further upstream. And every year we have about 1,000 volunteers participate. So again, if you've already been a part of it, you're included in that number. And if you're new, welcome. You're now a part of the number if you come out to the creek with us. Um, let's take a look at some of those data, right? Of those 2 million eels, let's break it down a little bit. I'm going to break down this graph because we're looking at a lot of things. We're looking at over time. The project started in 2008, and then we have all the way up until last year, 2025. The red line is the average eels caught per day. So on any given day, at any given site, if you open up the net, on average, how many eels did you see? You can see how it varies from like very low all the way up to over 1,000. Then the blue bars are the total number of eels caught for that season. So at all those sites together, how many eels do we catch in total? And you can see that the bars and the lines match the same trend, but we wanted to display it in a couple of different ways so people might absorb it in different ways. But again, in total, that's over 2 million glass eels. And overall, there are ups and downs, right? If you look at this graph, you see, whoa, it goes up some years and then down some years. What's going on? It's funny to look at this graph grow each year, and it gets more and more interesting every year. Because like, in 2019 and 2020, we were like, whoa, eel populations are back. eel numbers are way up. No, we couched it with a lot of understanding. And then things seem to have leveled back down. So I'm always interested in, are there natural cycles that we're seeing play out where over some periods of times we're going to get these ups and downs. But the longer the data set, the more interesting those trends become. But overall, we are still seeing more eels in our nets in the last few years than in the beginning of the project. Um, and this is covering, gosh, let's see. I mean, we're at almost 20 years now if you count them. But so for 2 decades, we're seeing overall an increase, and yet eel populations are still in decline. And the way that both of those things can be true is if you look at a larger time scale. Now, this is also a lot of information, so don't hold on. We're gonna break it down because we're looking at a lot of things. This blue line here is Anguilla rostrata. That's the American eel. That's our species. Anguilla anguilla is the European eel. Anguilla japonica, Japanese eel. So this was from a paper that came out, I think, in 2014, looking at global eel population declines. So if you remember from our graph, we were focused in on 2008 to 2025, where we're seeing, some ups and downs, but if you were going to put an overall trend line, it would be an increase. Um, but if we look at American eels, you can see in the 2000s at least, it does look like overall a little bit of an increase. But when you put that into a context of, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, you can see how there's still, even just a few decades back, a long ways to go to historical levels. These data are from the St. Lawrence, but eels are all one breeding population. So any issues in any eel waterway are going to impact the population overall. And on the flip side, any like habitat restoration, anything that's beneficial to eels is going to benefit the population overall. So they're both vulnerable and, open to the benefits of things happening in all those waterways, in the ocean as well. So while we are optimistic that things are moving in a positive direction, we still have a long way to go before we reach, um, you know, historic levels of even just a few decades ago, historic levels of 30 years, we have a long ways to go, but we're moving in the right way. Um, I wanted to share the data from Hannacroix specifically last year, just so we can see these are daily catches. So I said that net is checked every single day, although you can see a gap here. Sometimes, if there's big rainstorms coming through or something that will cause the stream to be dangerous in some way, we'll actually take the net out for a few days because we don't want the gear getting damaged. And most importantly, we don't want any of you out in the stream in any dangerous conditions. So if you ever show up to the creek and say, um, the water's too high, I don't feel comfortable, call us, obviously, to talk about it, but don't do it. Don't go in. Safety is above anything else. But you'll sometimes see gaps in the data because the streams are flowing way too fast. It's springtime. We get big rains. It happens. So we could see our daily catches. You could see some spikes here, about something like 500 eels, and then our biggest spike last year of 1,200 eels. And then many days of lower catches, which happens too. You can see how it varies day to day. It's not the same every day. Um, and then these circles here are our new and full moons. Sometimes we see peaks in eel catches around new and full moons because the tides are the most extreme. So we get the highest highs and the lowest lows. And glass eels, as they're moving upstream, they're going to have to go against the current at some point. They're known to ride the tidal cycle. So they'll ride the incoming tide upstream. And during those extra high tides, sometimes we see more eels, but not always. There's lots of other factors at play, temperature and flow and all kinds of things. But I wanted to give a sense of how many eels, you may be likely to see. Could be zero. There are 0 days. Could be dozens, could be hundreds, could be thousands. This actually was a lower year for Hannacroix than we often have. So we've had days where you open the net and it's like 10,000 eels, also possible. While it didn't happen last year, it has, and it could, many eels, depends. All right, I think yeah, that wraps me up. That was a ton of data and a ton of
Mhm.
information. I want to give people time to ask questions.
Yeah. Let me jump in with a couple we already have.
Yeah.
Um, so Victoria asked, are you comparing data from different sites? And did you say all three eels can mate?
Uh, Wait, what are we talking about? So
Mhm.
first question.
Yes,
Oh, all three. Oh, like all three species of eels?
correct.
Oh, so the different species of eels do not mate with each other, but they are in different parts of the world. Although the European eel also reproduces in the Sargasso Sea, but they are genetically distinct species. Although of course, like anything with eels, it gets complicated. Iceland, which is like the edge of the range between the two species, sometimes has genetic hybrids. But generally, no, they're two distinct species, and they're not interbreeding with each other. And then things like the Japanese eel, they're in the Pacific. They're on the clearly other half side of the world. And there are lots of other species as well. What was the first question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sure. Are you comparing data from the different sites?
We generally don't because each site is so unique. And I mean, I know at least one or maybe two people on the call have been to more than one sampling site. So if you see it firsthand, you'll understand how different each location is. They're really their own thing. But what we try to do is look at differences over time. So are we seeing different trends at different sites? That's one way we would compare. But we wouldn't necessarily say, oh, there were more eels at Hannacroix versus some other site because it's not comparing apples to apples. It's like apples and oranges. So we might say, how's the growth of the all the fruits over time, but not one to one.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, I have one. I'm curious, since it's been 10 years and you've been to all the different sites, I think every year, have you noticed the creeks changing? Like, has any creek in particular eroded significantly, and has that kind of changed the eel numbers for that site?
Streams are like moving systems. So they do change a little bit year to year, and over time. They're transporting sediment, the stream bank changes. Um, but there haven't been huge changes. It was like after Irene and Lee, which is going back a ways now, 2011, I want to say, were those big storms. There was some big sediment deposits at some places. So like one of our sites, I know there was like basically a little island at the mouth of the creek at low tide where the sediment just got kind of dumped right there. So that really shifted things quickly. But not since then, nothing like huge. They change slowly, and generally we're able to keep our nets in the same spot year to year for the most part, which is great because we want to keep it standardized.
So we have a question from Teresa. Wasn't there a net at ooh,
Post and
post?
kill.
Thank
Post and
you.
kill. Yeah, I see that. Yes. Yes, we did have a net at post and kill for a couple of years. And then we stopped fyke netting there because for a few reasons. The main one was safety. It's a larger system than any of our other sampling sites, so that it's just a bigger creek is what I mean by larger system. It's a wider creek, and it runs faster. So we had to just take it out so often, and it wasn't collecting the same like quality of data because of that. So that was really the main reason why we no longer fyke net there because it wasn't a really good net site. Yeah.
Um, Anybody else has any questions? If not, we can switch into the Hannacroix Creek specific information. Um, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and it's going to start on the last slide. Sorry about that. Find. Okay. How's it look? Thumbs up? Okay. All right. And if you do still have questions, feel free to add them into the chat. We'll get to those towards the end. Or if Sarah, if you can answer any of them, feel free. So again, we're talking about the Hannacroix Creek specific site. We do have a group of three actually, or say team of three this year. So myself, Will McCall, Will, if you're on here, if you want to jump on and say hi real fast. No?
Hey everybody, I'm trying to turn my video on. Am I coming through?
Let's see. There you are. We got a nice mountain in the background. Yep. And
Yeah, hi
then,
everybody.
mhm. Go ahead.
I'm a coworker of Lindsay's at CCE Columbia Green, and yeah, I help coordinate the monitoring at the Hannacroix Creek site. So I'll see you out there at the net, hopefully.
Yeah. And then Isabel, if you want to unmute and just say a quick hi. This is our intern for this year. She'll be out there quite often this year too.
Hi, I'm the intern.
Um, so great to have you guys on here with us. So, to go over a little bit of the Hannacroix Creek. So the creek flows into the Hudson right on the border of the Greene County and Albany County lines. Um, Hannacroix Creek is a tributary of the Hudson River. It's a 20-mile long creek, which primarily runs through Albany County, as well as into Greene County as it approaches the Hudson. So our site is off a private road. We kind of pinpointed it on the map on the left. And the landowner has allowed us to use the site since 2010. So we have a really good relationship with them and we want to keep it up. So we really respect the site. And he's a really great guy. If you ever run into him, his name is, depends on the year. Sometimes it goes by Bill, sometimes it's William, sometimes it's Will. Um, so it's again right near the town of New Baltimore, off of the I-87, accessible to the capital region, Greene County, uh, Hudson area. It's an easy drive over. And then you can see the fyke net on the right-hand side in the picture. We have Bowser on the left, me in the middle, and then I believe she's on here. I always forget her name. Always helping with the installation. So we have a
Teresa, she's on
Teresa,
here.
thank you. I wanted to say Amanda, and I knew that was wrong. Thank you. Hi, Teresa. Um, so to talk about a little bit about how a fyke net works, to echo what Sarah said earlier, we kind of trap the eels in this net along the creek. It's a long kind of cylindrical netting with, I'd say, internal cones inside, and it makes easy entry for eels and maybe small salamanders to get in. But once they get in, they kind of get confused and they can't find their way back out. Um, so as the tides come in, they get trapped in there. The tides go down. The net is still in the water. And then that's when we go in, pull up the net, open the left-hand side of it, if you can see in the left-hand picture where the rope is, and pull them out. I think there's another picture coming up that shows that a little bit clearer. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So how the monitoring works is that we go down into the creek, and you can see in this left-hand picture, there's a little bit of a steep grade to it, but we do have a rope that connects to a tree, a little bit of organic root steps that kind of follow all the way down to the water. Um, and then go into the creek with waders. These waders are supplied on site and will remain there all season, so you don't need to have your own waders. They'll be there for you. Once we get down there with the group, we have someone open the net, untie the knots, open it up, There are different methods on getting the eels out, but essentially the goal is to get them all out, bring them up to shore, and count them. Um, and again, like Sarah was saying, we have different numbers at the Hannacroix Creek. We can have 0, we can have 1, and we can have near 10,000. It's always fun to find out what you're going to get when you're opening the net, especially in the cold weather when you're going to get the higher numbers. Makes it worth all of the layers that we're all wearing on the left-hand picture. So once we get the eels out of the water, on a, let's say, ideal day, everybody will kind of have their own bucket. We'll scoop them up with little nets, and count them by hand. So you essentially have a bucket with eels bringing them up from the creek and a bucket that you're counting them into. And then again, ideally, you'll have somebody with the binder that will be keeping the tallies of how many eels are being counted. Um, and then these eels, once they are counted, get released further upstream, to continue on growing and living their best eel life. A couple things to mention about the Hannacroix Creek, is the safety. So again, we have a steep embankment. You can kind of tell a little bit better in this picture. That is Maji the dog, who is a little bit of our mascot, climbing up the bank right there. Deeper waters are earlier in the year. So when we start off, we typically, again, have that when we put in the fyke net. However, last year was a different year. We started off in t-shirts and ended in sweatshirts. So we never know. Our creek does tend to move fast in high water. So if there is any time that you feel the water is moving too fast or it's too deep, don't go in. You can always give us a call. We can talk through it with you, and move on from there. If there are any days, I think as Sarah said before, that we'll have high volume of water, we know it's coming, we'll pull the net out in advance. And we'll let you know so you don't go to the site thinking that you're going to be going in on a rainy, stormy day. Another thing for safety is we never want to monitor alone. We always want to have at least 2 people of high school age and adults older that are able to get in the water. We also want to be mindful of the site itself. There are some ticks and poison ivy, private property, so we just want to be respectful of the area, and what we're stepping on and touching. And again, just to reiterate, if you ever feel unsafe in the area, give us a call. There's a white binder with all of the data sheets and information cheat sheets that have our numbers on there. So feel free to call or text. And of course, the big highlights besides eels is there are other wildlife available to see, to handle in a very safe way. We tend to get a lot of salamanders in the net here. So we count them in our data sheet, let them go immediately. But we've also seen some snakes around the site, lots of bald eagles. We had a bat on the net one year. That was exciting. And we didn't see him last year, but the first 2 years, I think, that I did it, we had this toad that would come every time we would be out there, probably eating all the glass eels. But again, eels, volunteering here, there's a great way to get in touch with nature, meet other people that also love it. It's a special bond when you've counted over 3,000 eels together, especially when you've counted near 10,000. It's something that you remember and you can relay to each other in the future, especially when I think we haven't talked about this, but we have an eelibration at the end of the season, which just means if you've come out to the eel site in person, you're invited to a celebration at the end of the season, where we get a little bit of feedback from you. We have a little potluck, and then we hand out eel t-shirts. And so how to get involved? There are different types of volunteers. We have what we call an eel leader, or what you'll see on the calendar to sign up for is the Eeler 1. So this just means that you have done this volunteering before. you're very comfortable with the protocols and monitoring, um, or you want to become one, you can take the training and come out a few more times after that, get really familiar with it, and then start putting your name in that slot. This is also a position where if you have a group, if you have like Girl Scouts or a classroom that you want to bring out, ideally middle school and above, um, you can bring them out underneath you as their leader. So we'll be basically doing kind of train the trainer where we'll train you and then you can bring your own group out to the site, sign up for yourself. We'll walk you through it, how to do it. Other types of volunteer is the eel volunteer, just general. On the calendar, this will be listed as like an eeler 2 through 6. Just as important as an eeler 1, you'll get to learn all of the basics of monitoring. And we've had a lot of people who started here and then come out so often that they just organically grow into an eeler 1. And they're probably the longest volunteers that we've had, at least since I've started. I know Tracy's on this call. She's definitely one of them. I just want to call her out. She's such a great volunteer. If you ever see her on the list, you know you're in good hands. And then we also have a position called a land eeler. And this just means if you don't feel comfortable getting down into the creek anymore, you can stay on land, be kind of a guru of the data collection. And it also helps us identify how many people we still need out at the creek. Since we still need 2 people in the water for safety reasons, knowing that there's a person that just wants to be on land, we can make sure we have the 2 people that can get in the water. Let's see. So moving to the last slide. This is myself and Will's contact information. If you would like to become an eel leader or eeler 1, feel free to reach out to us or put that in the chat. We can connect with dates once we know when the eels are coming. We'll have a clear idea of some training dates, but we can connect and come out with you probably during the first couple weeks to do more of a hands-on training with the eeler 1, get you really comfortable with doing nuts, getting familiar with the weight extrapolation protocol, which is for when we have over 3,000 eels. Again, well, that's a lot of information, but we'll get into that during the training. Just gonna review my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think that might be everything. So I'm going to stop my share and see if we have any questions.
I did just answer Gordon's question about in the chat about if we could like take a picture and then count back in the lab or back in the office. We haven't done that before, and then I was mentioning that we have lots of like ways around to make counting time efficient. So it sounds like a lot to count 1,000 eels or 2,000 eels, but we do it. It goes pretty quick, especially if you have a lot of people there working together. And then Lindsay said, like at the same time as I was writing it, which is that if we get many thousands of eels, which doesn't happen a ton, so I don't want to like, scare anybody away. It happens on occasion. We do have separate protocols to do weight extrapolations. So if you ever are on site and open the net and go, oh, that's way too many eels, what do I do? Call us. And that goes for everything. It's not only like if something's unsafe or whatever. We put our phone numbers all over the data binder because we want to be in communication with you. So if you have questions, send us a picture if you like, want a fish ID, take a picture, send it to us. We want to hear about it. I really like, it's great to hear about things as they're happening rather than days or weeks or months later. We want to know what's going on. We're also here to support you. So please get in touch with us with any questions on site.
Yeah, so I just answered Adam's question about going to the site. You're remembering there was some changes happening. We haven't been out yet. We plan on going the beginning of March to check it out and make sure. I was going to see, Sarah, do you want to just mention usually when you or kind of the flow of how we start putting the nets in from Staten
Sure.
Island north?
Yeah, yeah. So usually, I mean, it makes sense. We follow where the eels are going. We start putting out nets downriver. Right now, we have some gear out downriver, not nets yet. But we do in some other places like Teresa, instead of fyke netting at the posting kill, we use eel mops now. So there's different gears. We're talking about fyke netting specifically for this project, but we use these devices called eel mops, which is really it's like rope split apart on a concrete block. It doesn't trap the eels, but they can hide out in it. So we have those out in Staten Island and Yonkers right now. We haven't caught any eels yet. The last few years, this time, we had already caught the first glass eels. But because we're having like a real winter this season, we have not yet caught eels. So because Hannacroix is the furthest north, the furthest upriver, you all will have the most notice of when the sampling season will get started, as opposed to everybody else we like work our way upriver. We follow the eels as they go. So we'll let Lindsay know when the first eels are caught downriver, and then you should have some sense of, oh, it'll be in a few weeks. We'll be getting started up at Hannacroix. Um, so stay tuned. No eels in the river that we have caught yet this season, but could be any day now.
Great. All right. Just gonna kind of wrap it up. Just make sure if anybody else has any questions, put it in the chat. Um, give it a minute or two. But again, just want to reiterate if you're interested in being a volunteer and either haven't been at this site or haven't been out in a long time. Actually, since I put down or took away our contact information, I will put mine in the chat. Feel free to email me, and Will, if you want to put yours on there too, just as an alternative. Reach out to us, let us know uh, sorry, I was laughing at Tracy, Sarah, the visual hand motion.
Is this what got you? This is an eel
Yes,
mop. If you've
it is an
seen
eel
one, you
mop.
know what it is. It's just rope
Yeah,
split apart, so it looks like this.
yeah. Yeah, feel free to reach out to myself or Will for more information on becoming the eel volunteer at our site. If you're interested in becoming an eel leader, Eeler one. Also, let us know that we're always looking for more people to kind of be leads on the site. And just have one question. What's the training process for someone looking to bring students?
Mm,
Yep. So training process would be that we would train you first to make sure that you're comfortable with all the protocols, can go through what bringing a group of students would look like, and how many would probably be appropriate for the site, as well as age kind of ranges that would do best in this environment. So yeah, we would again train you first and then make sure you're comfortable, and then you can bring your students out. Again, we'll be in contact via email or phone if you have any questions, feel uncomfortable when you get out there, forget something. Again, the binder that's out there has all the cheat sheets. So if you forget how to tie a knot, there's step-by-step instruction how to do it. Same with how to do all the protocols, and so on.
yeah, the purpose of today is really to just give some like larger picture background information. All of the specifics, like the real detail stuff, you'll learn on site, and that's best done on site. And this like virtual meeting beforehand means that we don't spend an hour talking about eel life cycle at the stream, which we could easily do. We could spend many hours talking about eel science at the creek, and we probably will a little bit. But it gives us more time to get into the like, how do we tie the knots? How do we get the eels out of the net? How do we count the eels efficiently to get into really get into the weeds of how to check the net rather than talking more broadly. So just know that like this is not all the information you're going to receive. You'll get a lot of real hands-on um, training from, you know, one of these coordinators or maybe an experienced sampler a lot of peer-to-peer training happens as well.
Right. All right. I think that might be all of our questions. Victoria, yeah, just follow up with me, send me an email, and I can send you a photo of that map. Um, great. Thank you, Sarah, for coming
Of course. Thanks,
and
everybody.
presenting. And you may see her at a training in the future. Um, if not, it's always a pleasure to see you. Great. And thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you hopefully very soon-ish in March
When it warms up a little
when it
bit,
warms up a little
see you
bit.
at the creek with
Yeah.
catching some eels.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Okay. Thanks
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.